all healthy, respectful relationships are grounded in reciprocity. You give to me, I give to you. You support me, I support you. There are people who treat the gods like vending machines. They ignore them, and then they need something, and they go pour some offerings, and hey, I got a problem. Can you bail me out? And it doesn't always work that way. And so we do have that when we're doing it right, we're forming these reciprocal relationships. We're engaging, we're making offerings on a regular basis. We're praying on a regular basis and meditating. And as I tell people, prayer is talking to the gods, meditation is listening for their response. We build those relationships and we reinforce them on a weekly and daily and monthly basis. And then when there is trouble, we've got that relationship to draw on. It's the same thing in our human relationships as we build our religious communities, our pagan communities, witchcraft communities. There has to be reciprocity.
Welcome to Coffee and Divination, a podcast about the arts of obtaining hidden knowledge in changing times. Join me, Joanna Farrar, to chat with experts from around the world on tarot, runes, geomancy, and the many ways divination can help us navigate and plan our paths ahead. On today's episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with John Beckett. John is a Druid, author, and longtime voice in the pagan and polytheist communities. John has written extensively about the nature of devotion, ritual, and deepening our spiritual practices as polytheists, and in this conversation we explored his approach to polytheism and animism, and also the role of divination in his practice. We also spent time talking about the challenges and opportunities for the modern pagan communities, and the importance of developing meaningful relationships not only with our gods and spirits, but with each other. It was an insightful and inspiring discussion, and I am excited to share it with you here. Before we dive into that, a couple of quick announcements. First, Coffee and Divination now has its very own YouTube channel. So if you would like to support the show and help us grow, please head over to YouTube, like and subscribe, and share it with your friends who might enjoy the conversations. We'll also be including some exclusive content and deep dives into divination on the YouTube channel. And secondly, I'm very excited to be a presenter at the Sacred Space Conference in Maryland later in March, where I will be speaking about the modern seer tradition that I practice, which is rooted in a Hellenic framework. If you're attending the conference, please come up and say hi, and I would love to see you there. As always, if you'd like to stay connected, you can always find me over on Instagram at Coffee and Divination, where I share updates and more about upcoming episodes. For now, let's get into this fantastic conversation with author John Beckett. Enjoy the show. So I am so thrilled to have our guest on today. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been a goal of mine to have you on the show for a while, even though this podcast has been going for a little bit. It is my honor to have you on the show. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I always appreciate the opportunity to talk about what I do.
Wonderful. So there's a sort of traditional first question with this podcast, which is for first-time guests, I like to always ask what your first introduction or exposure to divination was, whether that was something where you just remember a family member, being interested in astrology or reading cards or, tea leaves or something, or if it was just something that you pursued a little bit later in life. What would you say was your first exposure to divination as a practice?
What I saw on TV. I remember some old horror movies. I grew up watching the Universal classics. I remember Dark Shadow. Occasionally the tarot cards would come out in there. And then, of course, there was the James Bond movie where Jane Seymour is reading tarot like she's got to feed into a spy satellite. Doesn't quite work that way. But yeah, my first experience was what I saw on TV. I should probably tell you about my second experience. Um, so my I I'm the middle of three children. My older brother was 13 years older than me, and so he was far ahead of me. He went off. He went off to the Navy, came back, went to college, and was living at home. And sometimes when he would be away, I would go snooping through his room to see what cool stuff I could find. I would have been, if he was back, he would have been in his early 20s, so I would have been 10. So I'm snooping through his room one day and I find a deck of tarot cards. Now, my family were Baptists and such things were strictly frowned upon. So of course I had to check them out. And I took the cards out and looked at the little white book and shuffled the cards and decided to try reading. And I threw out the Celtic cross spread and looked stuff up in the book, and I got nothing. I realized that whatever there was to tarot, it clearly wasn't as intuitive as Jane Seymour reading in the James Bond movie, and that was going to take a lot of work. That, at 10 years old, I just wasn't going to have the opportunity to do that, and I wouldn't until much, much later.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, I definitely saw Dark Shadows when I was a kid in reruns and loved that. And I know exactly what you're talking about with the Jane Seymour thing. And there are a lot of really excellent and interesting ways that I've had guests on that have kind of had that pop culture first reference to it. But it's interesting. So your first kind of encounter in the real world, shall we say, with tarot didn't go as the movie predicted. So
Nope.
when did you then get interested enough to try again?
So I've had a long spiritual journey from growing up in a Baptist church and realizing that something wasn't quite right, and growing up to the point where I could do what I wanted to do, and um, trying to be a mainline Protestant, and that not working out real well. And then I discovered paganism and Wicca in particular, and I was 31 at the time. And I decided to go out and I was going to do what a lot of people do. They start collecting stuff. I bought an athame. I bought a chalice. I bought a deck of tarot cards. Bought the Robin Wood deck, and still have it. Still read with it. And I was able to get a little bit out of it. Um, I was certainly couldn't go reading without notes, but I had enough spiritual experience at that point to understand some of the concepts in the tarot, and understood that it's had a little better idea of what divination is and what it isn't, and got a little better with it. Never really could get comfortable with it until I finally broke down and took an in-person class. And um, I've been a member of Denton Cups, the Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans, since 2003, and Dolores Neighbors, who sadly um, moved on into the other world a couple years ago. Um, Dolores was just a wonderful lady. Um, really knew tarot well, and she taught a class, and I took her class, and all of a sudden I could read tarot. And then I got busy and set the cards down. And about 6 months later, I picked them back up because I had a question, and it was gone. I had I hadn't retained it. Fortunately, the next year, Dolores taught her class again, and I took it again, and this time it stuck. So, yeah, I tried to learn teaching myself. I tried learning with books. I had to take the in-person class twice before I could really read with confidence.
Do you think that it had something to do with the break in your practice, that you didn't sort of retain it by using it regularly? Or do you think it was just, no, you needed a certain amount of like in-person time with the cards with someone in front of you?
It was a break.
Yeah.
It was a break. Dolores did a great job. I came out of that class feeling good about it, getting good readings, and then I set it down and I lost it. I didn't retain it.
Oh, yeah.
The second time I retained it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is what we repeatedly do, obviously. So, yeah. No, it's very interesting. So, I'm kind of skipping in my questions. With the way that you interact with divination, obviously, you are very respected as an author and a writer within the larger pagan community today. So, as that sort of public face, really, as a neo-pagan kind of public face, how do you feel that I know that you don't necessarily read publicly, but do you still incorporate those types of tarot or divinatory practices in how you teach when you're in more like private settings? Or how do you kind of incorporate divination into your, public face as a leader?
Um, I've taught tarot before. In fact, I have an online class. I teach online classes.
Yeah,
Um, I set them up to be on demand so that people can take them when they want to take them, as opposed to when we can all get together. And that's been one of my more popular classes, is the introduction to tarot. So I teach the class. I do some public reading, although I stopped last year because I was life just got too busy, and I did not have the time to do it right. And if I can't do it right, I'm not going to do it at all. Most of my reading is for myself or for people in my close group who say, "Can you look into this for me?" Um, but I've done public readings. I've done psychic fairs. I've again used to have my shingle out on. I'll put it out again one day, but not right now.
sure. So, kind of going back a little bit into the past, for those who are not as familiar with your background, I mean, you are kind of known as a druid, and of course are in numerous leadership roles as a druid. Can you tell us a little bit about how your path kind of took you in that direction?
Of leadership there,
Oh, well, just
or just
within paganism towards druidry itself.
well,
So, for those who have not like read your books or aren't familiar.
okay. Well, again, as I was saying, I grew up in a fundamentalist church. Didn't work. Tried to be a mainline Protestant. That didn't really work for different reasons. Um, Discovered paganism. I met a Wiccan, and here was all this. Here was everything I had been looking for. Here was a religion that said nature isn't fallen, nature is good. Um, Here's a nature that worshipped a goddess as well as a god. Here's a religion that says magic is real. Just what I was looking for. Um, Unfortunately, I had not dealt with my religious baggage from that fundamentalist childhood, and I never got anywhere with it. I would start and stop and start and stop, and I'd come to a difficult I'd come to some difficult topic, and I would just set it down. And finally, it was Thanksgiving night 2001. I had an epiphany, and it was like all of the gods at once were yelling at me, "Get serious or move on to something else." And I wanted this bad enough, I decided to get serious. And so I started reading, and I went back and I started dealing with that, baggage from the toxic religion of my childhood. And I read I read some Buddhist books, and I read some Jewish authors and got a very different take on how to read the Bible. Read some Christian history that they didn't teach me in Baptist Sunday school. Um, Learned that they didn't tell me the whole story. got a hold of Joseph Campbell's The Power of Myth on PBS. And I have some issues with Joseph Campbell now because of the way he tried to mush everything together, but it was exactly what I needed to hear at the time. I got serious, and I was reading and studying and practicing and meditating and really starting to move along. And after about a year, I realized, okay, I need a I need a group. And I had already felt a sort of a call to Druidry, but there were no Druid groves in the area. Um, didn't really want to try to find a Wiccan coven. I heard about this thing called CUPS, Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans. Went to Denton CUPS at Imbolc 2003 just to check it out, and I never left. So um, I think I skipped over one of the things you wanted to ask. I was like so many people. I came into paganism through Wicca, and it never really spoke to me. But then I discovered Druidry, and it was like something said, "Yeah, that's who you are." And reading about the ancient Druids and how they were the seers, and they were the keepers of records and lore, and they were not the kings but the advisors to kings, and all that just really resonated with me, and I started diving into that. When I got into cups, I got thrown into a leadership position pretty early, and I knew I needed some formal training. So I joined OBOD, Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, the largest Druid order in the world based out of England. They have a wonderful correspondence course. I worked my way through that. Um, then I started having some other questions that really didn't fit in any particular niche. And I started a blog in 2008 to just to do some religion in public. That went fairly well. I got asked to move to Patheos, which is the largest multi-faith religious website in the world. Move my blog to Patheos, and then came the first book, The Path of Paganism, and then the second book, the Paganism in Depth. And here we are. I was the coordinating officer of Denton Cups for 12 years before I decided it was time for somebody else to take that on. Full member of the Druid grade in OBOD, an ordinary member in ADF, Arnriach Fane, largest Druid order in this country. Yeah, and have been blogging since '08. And yeah, here I am.
I mean, there's a lot of interplay, and I think I've had discussions on this podcast a number of times with various authors and diviners and people about how the ideas of polytheism and a polytheistic worldview kind of plays into the practices of divination, magic too, obviously. I mean, it plays into everything, because polytheism, I think, really does give a certain a very different worldview in general. Like the frame, the lenses that you are using to look at everything around you are very legitimately different if you are looking at something from a poly perspective as opposed to some sort of mono perspective. And I think that applies very much to divination. But you are on your blog, you very much speak to the experiences of someone who is very serious as a polytheist. And could you perhaps, I mean, that's, while Wicca has kind of changed a lot over the years, I started as Wiccan, and our tradition, the tradition that I'm high priestess of, is still technically Wiccan, but we really kind of start to define ourselves more as witches. We've kind of moved more towards using witchcraft as a term, because Wicca is still a little bit more duotheist, and our tradition tends to be more polytheist and animist, but it's still within that milieu, really. Can you perhaps talk a little bit about why you sort of gravitated more towards a polytheist perspective as opposed to that sort of Wiccan duality, if I'm describing that correctly? And if not, please, talk about it in your own
Yeah.
terms.
I will say I know some Wiccans who are very much polytheists, but
Sure,
what you
that
say that
it's changed a lot. Yeah.
it has. But for me, I went from in growing up monotheist, and then as I became more serious about my paganism, I was pretty much in that duotheist mode. Um, and then early on, when I was at Denton Cups, this was probably would have been '04 maybe. We did for our summer solstice ritual, we did an Egyptian temple ritual. So we did our best to reconstruct what the Egyptian priests might have done on one of their holy days. And in preparation for this, all of us who were leading the ritual agreed that we would take 9 nights and spend one night in meditation with each of 9 different Egyptian gods. And so I did that. And what I found is that as I was, again, in meditation with these deities, my experience of Isis was different from my experience of Osiris. My experience of Osiris was different from my experience of Nephthys, um, and so on and so forth. And it hit me all of a sudden. Well, if I'm experiencing these deities as individual persons, then probably I should conceive of them as individual persons. I should think about them as individual persons and then relate to them as individual persons. So for me, it's very much an experience driven thing. My experience of one God is not the same as my experience of the others. So uh, it's been a very organic thing for me. And the again, the more I go, um, it's it's become a natural thing for me that okay, it's Sunday night. This is my night to make offerings to the Morrigan. It's Wednesday night. This is my night to make offerings to Cernunnos. Um, it's the summer solstice. Yeah, we're going to do our Egyptian temple ritual again. So I need to start talking to Isis and Osiris and Horus again. Um, yeah, definitely been an experience driven thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, a really wonderful sort of story for people to hear also because it is as someone who loves books, and I'm sure you do as well, there's a certain amount that we get from our study, our very serious study of how these things evolved over time in very different times and places than our own. But then it does change and necessarily kind of grow out of our lived experience in our own times and places. And that's also extremely valid. I think that there's something that's always interesting to me to talk to people who came from very strongly monotheist backgrounds. My own background was more like I was raised agnostic. My parents were like, I believe whatever you want. So the fact that their child ended up a witch was probably not what they intended. But whatever, it happens. But at the same time, there is a very, as I was saying before, there's a difference of sort of worldview. And as you were saying, there was sort of, I mean, you brought up earlier the idea of needing to sort of deal with the idea of monotheism and the background of that and how that is different from a polytheistic worship perspective. And for myself, when I've spoken to some people, they will have a little bit of difficulty either we can talk about divination forms of like splitting focus between different divination forms to a degree. That's just, well, you have a certain limited amount of time, so you need to focus on only one at a time in order to learn it properly. But then there's also, I think, from a monotheist perspective, there can be a feeling that perhaps, like patronage or focus has to be more singular, whereas a true polytheist perspective is more like, no, you can have all these different interests, you can be called in many directions, and that's perfectly normal and okay. How would you kind of think about that or speak to people's struggles with that idea of how do you balance this new idea of having a lot of different cultures and deities speaking to you as opposed to just one?
I don't know, but I wouldn't trade it for anything else.
I
Um,
agree.
so people say, okay, if I get this question a lot is well, if I'm worshiping, working for more than one deity, how do I know who's first? And well, they're all first.
We like to have hierarchies
We
a
like
lot.
now. I will say that Cernunnos is always first in my life. He was he has been with me. I have been with him for a very long time, and he is always first. But he is first among equals. And and when the Morrigan wants something, she gets it. And when Brigid wants something, she gets it. And when Lou wants something, he gets it. Um, it is. It really isn't a case of a hierarchy. It's a case of yes and in my case, and I think in most people's cases, um, yeah, another question that I get sometimes is about jealousy, and for the most part, our gods are not jealous gods. They want what they want, and as long as you give them what they ask for, they're perfectly fine with you also working for worshiping someone else. Um, our gods aren't jealous gods. Sometimes the dance card can get a little full. Um, I have said no on a couple of occasions. Um, I'm in that case, it's good that I have these commitments. No, I can't. Um, let's just say me and trickster gods don't get along. I'm very much a creature of order. And no, I can't work. I can't work for you. The Morrigan has me very busy right now. Go take it up with her. Um, but
Yeah.
for the most part, um, again, they want what they want, and every time someone else has come into my life, it's been a good thing. They brought something I needed. They've involved me in work that needed to be done, work that may have been hard, may have been difficult, may have been time consuming, but it was something that needed to be done, needs to be done. And and as I said, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's already you've touched on something which I think is also important when people are kind of new to this stuff, which is the idea that um, there are ways of saying respectful, not at this time, or or no, I can't because. And it's not, I think that also is a different mindset shift of yes, I am not the same as a deity. I am not the same as a spirit. I am my own type of spirit. I have my own personhood and agency. And that's a different way of sort of negotiating and having a dance card, which is not necessarily talked about in our culture, our modern culture, as much from either an atheist or agnostic or monotheist perspective. Um, is there anything more that you might want to like give people as advice on that? Because I think it's really important.
In most cases, if you tell a deity no, they just move on. They would in most cases they're looking for people who want to work with them, want to work for them, want to be a part of what they're doing in the world. And if you don't want to do that, there's other people out there who will do it. There
Yeah.
have been a few people who were forcibly claimed and did not really have much of a choice. Um, I can't explain that. I just know that's has been some people's experiences, but that's rare. In my own case, and in almost all the cases of other people I know, if you say, "Nah, I really don't want to do this," um, okay, I'll go find somebody else. Now you will miss out on an opportunity. If you say no today, you may not be able to say yes tomorrow. So what you said, what the words you used, not at this time, I think that's a good way to approach it. Unless you're just absolutely positive you're never going to do this, not at this time. Can we talk about this in a year? Something to leave the door open as opposed to, nah, I really don't want to do this. And a year later, you wish you had that opportunity and it's not there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So this also, I think, we're kind of skipping ahead in my question list, but I'm fine with that at the moment. Um, this kind of speaks to we have just kind of immediately gotten into spirit communication essentially, and what that kind of feels like and what that conversation sounds like. And if somebody is listening and they are not so up on the techniques of that, how, on a practical level, how are you conceiving of these conversations as having like presence in your life? I mean, we're talking about druidry, there's signs, there's omens, there's straight up, meditation and trance, there's using cards. Like, what is the methodology that you're thinking of when we are talking about this?
It's a good question, and it doesn't have a simple answer.
Yeah, I
Uh,
figured.
our and our and our mainstream culture does not prepare people for this. Um, you have fiction that tells people to expect bombastic signs that almost never happen. Um, the gods don't need to yell. They're far more subtle. Um, going back to that example, the story I told about meditating on 9 different Egyptian deities. I was meditating. I was sitting on the floor in the dark with the candle. Didn't have any statues at the time, so I didn't have any images to use, but I was thinking of Isis. I was thinking of the Mistress of Magic. I was thinking of the story of how when Osiris was murdered by his brother Set, she went all around the world trying to find the pieces and put them back together again to bring him back to life, and meditating on what I knew about her, and then being silent and listening. Now, at first, it was very difficult for me to tell what's my imagination and what's a God talking to me. That's hard to do, particularly at first. This is one of the reasons why so many magical traditions put so much emphasis on self-development and self-knowledge. Because if you know what's you, then you can recognize what's not you. And I tell people that if what you hear tells you what you want to hear, or if it tells you, um, or if it plays on your fears, that's probably you. If it tells you something you have no way of knowing, if it tells you something that you know is true, but you've been avoiding it, well, that's probably not you. Over time, you start to learn again. You learn what's you. You learn what's not you. Um, Now we're talking about divination. One of the things I have done frequently and still do in many cases is okay. Um, um, Brigid told me to do something. Am I sure that I've got that right? Let me go draw some cards and let me do some divination to confirm what I heard. And almost always what I what the cards tell me is, yep, that's what you heard. I have a blog post, and if you search for it with my name, and the title is "You Know My Voice." I wrote about a story about something that happened to me a couple of years ago. I had a friend who asked me to verify something, verify something with the Morrigan for her, and of course, her question was private, but not really important. But I said, great queen, I've been asked this. What can you tell me? And I hear the answer, and I say, okay, fine. Let me draw some cards to verify that. And what I heard was, no, you know my voice. And I realized that I do. I know the Morrigan's voice. I know Cernunnos's voice. I don't know Apollo's voice. I don't work with Apollo on a regular basis. Um, but the deities that I work with on a regular basis, I've been there. I've been around them long. I recognize them. I like to compare it to um, some years ago when Pantheacon was still a thing. Um, don't know if you ever got a chance to go to that before it. It was the largest hotel-based pagan gathering in the world. Happened every February in San Jose, California. Somewhere in the 2,000, 2,500 people were crowded into the DoubleTree Hotel. And I remember, not for the second time I was there, I'm walking through the lobby of the um, I'm walking through the lobby of the DoubleTree, and it is packed and it is loud. But all of a sudden, I recognize Jason Mankey's voice. I know Jason. I've talked to him. We've talked on the phone. We've met in person. I know his voice. And out of all of that roar, I could pick it up because I know it. It's the same thing with the Morgan. It's the same thing with Cernunnos. Um, it takes practice.
Yeah. Yeah. As with so many very important things, it is practice that then gives you it's both a skill and it's also then the confidence to trust the skill at the same time. But
Yes.
both of those things take time and practice. So can't get one without the other. Yeah, that is very, very true. And I think it also kind of speaks to what I have heard many times from people who are sort of newer to these arts of, well, how do I tell that it's not just me making it up? And the only answer that you can really give is you have to check yourself enough times while you're learning. And then at a certain point, you'll know. You will just know.
Yes.
But that's it still sounds a little imprecise when you're first hearing that as advice.
It's very much imprecise.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, that is really, really lovely. And kind of getting there's the element of at first having the confidence to know this is one of the things where I go back to that like sort of poly perspective of knowing because we have multiple tools and we have that multiplicity is also a part of saying, well, I can check with the cards. I can do other ways of checking my results, my information, and that's a part of a poly perspective. It's a poly of methods as well until you get to the point where you can say, no, I know the voice. I don't have to do that anymore. But you do have the ability to check with a friend or another divination system that is your friend at the time.
It really helps if you're doing these things in a group.
Yeah.
Um,
Buddy
because
system. Buddy system.
I have, if something really strange happens, I've got two or three local friends who I work with on a regular basis. I know they see the world the same way I do. They've had these experiences too. And if I'm in, if I'm in doubt, if I got serious doubts about something, I've got people I can run it by. And of course, since they're here, a lot of times when those strange experiences happen, they're there with me.
Yeah, you have even more information on the ground for that. So I think that it kind of ties a little bit neatly into we could talk on so many different topics, I know, and I hope that we will have more discussions where we can talk on 30 different topics. But the other thing that I of the many things that I respect you greatly for and the work that you do, you have spoken a lot about the role of community and leadership and kind of both the strengths and the challenges of that, shall we say, within the neo-pagan community. And I was just wondering if you've been doing this for a while. What do you currently think are the state of the strengths and the challenges of the neo-pagan movement right now? Because I mean I started practicing when I was little. I started practicing when I was 12 or 13, and I'm now older than that, that's for sure. So I have seen it change, and I have sort of moved into more of like a leadership position. But we all see things from our own little corners of the neo-pagan movement, and yours is a broader perspective. So where do you kind of see right now the cultural shifts with paganism, and kind of where we might want to focus some of our energies in order to see the health of it grow?
So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I genuinely thought we were moving toward um, becoming not one institutional religion, but multiple institutional religions. I thought that we would see more things like Circle Sanctuary and Covenant of the Goddess and ADF and local groups networking together and really starting to build some structure, to build some institutions that will outlast their founders. Even before the pandemic, it had become clear that's just not happening. Um, and I've given up trying to fight it. I am, I like institutionalists. I am envious of the religions that have strong institutions. Um, it bothers me that so many people have to start from zero when they could be starting from far beyond that. It bothers me that people move into a new area and there are Christian churches on every corner, and there's anymore. There's a couple of mosques in the area, and there's Jewish synagogues in the area. You might even find a Buddhist temple somewhere, but you got to hunt to find a pagan group and hope it's and hope it's healthy. Um, the growth in the in the pagan movement that started in the 90s was all solitary practitioners, and I think we're reaping the harvest of what was sown then. Um, my focus at the moment is trying to encourage people to embrace depth in their practice, whatever that happens to be, and then to network together, even if it's just three people who meet in your backyard, every other month. Um, we're we haven't done a good job of building true community, and certainly not building institutions. But um, you know, religion isn't something meant to be done alone. My friend Cynthia Talbot, who's one of the she's now the coordinating officer of Denton Cups. She likes to say, "You can't dance a spiral dance by yourself."
Nowhere near as fun.
It's nowhere near as fun. So yeah, um, do what you can where you are. Um, and I'm encouraging people to work on depth, um, but also, you know, build what you can. But the days when, oh, let's rent a storefront and we'll have a community center, and that
Yeah.
didn't work.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
weren't ready for it. We're not ready for it.
I think that one of the things that I have noticed, and I'm curious about your opinion on this, is that I think that there's also, because of, and possibly this has to do with, and it's a strength of, I think, our movement, and the very like poly thing I've been talking about, of this idea of there's a multiplicity of different traditions and gods that you can worship, and you're drawn to this pantheon or that, and that's wonderful. And they are very legitimately different. But I think it's also that sometimes there's what is it? The perfect is the enemy of the good. And I don't mean that in terms of protecting people who are, going to either be predators or,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
or try to prey on people who are there, legitimately to learn no, there's no place for that.
Yes,
But at the same time, there could be, um, perhaps there's been too much of a specialization almost in a sense of like, no, I'm looking for people who absolutely agree with me on every single religious point of this. And then it's like, well, then it's not gonna necessarily, you're not gonna have enough people. And if we were able to sort of broaden our perspective and say, well, we don't necessarily practice the same way, but we can interlink in a way, that's what I feel is kind of missing. Do you know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
become too specialized.
Too many people in the pagan community live in mortal fear that someone's going to try to tell them what to do. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
it's And I get it. I came out of a toxic religious environment where that was very controlling and very much, thou shalt do this and thou shalt believe that. Um, but we can't, anarchy doesn't help any of us. So, yeah, it's people are looking for exactly what they want. But also, I think we have to be honest and accept that a lot of the people in the who call themselves pagans, witches, druids, whatever, um, a lot of them aren't willing to put in the work to build a community. You can go to again. You can walk into the local Methodist church and here's the whole thing laid out for you. All you got to do is walk in. You want to sit in the pew and listen, you can do that. You want groups, they got that. It's all set out. It's all there for you. Just come in and it's ready. You try to do that in the pagan world, it's not there. You want to build it, you're going to have to help build it. And that's work. It's a lot of work. Um, and a lot of people aren't willing to invest that kind of work in building community, in building programs, in in showing up not you know not every third Sabbath, but every time. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes my co-high priestess and I will be like, but I thought that there would just be that we would just get more, fun times and people feeding us grapes. And it's like, oh no, no, it's just a lot of organizing and spreadsheets and scheduling.
So yeah, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you can relate to this. But Byron Ballard, who is the calls herself the Village Witch of Asheville, North Carolina, very much a um, um, she is a traditional witch, and she says if you want to know who the high priestess is, look for who's sweeping the floor and locking up the building at the end of the night.
Yes, absolutely. But I think that also that ties into the idea of reciprocity and relationships that we have
Yes.
as polytheists, because there's a lot of benefits that we get, a lot of blessings from our relationships with these deities, but there's also a lot of um, sacrifice, but sacrifice in maybe a slightly different definition of the word. So I know you've written on this a fair amount, but like, how do you think of that nature of the sacrifice of time or energy and things of that nature in the reciprocity that we have with these spirits?
That's a lot.
No, that's not a
That's a
question.
lot.
That's like an
That's a lot
essay.
into one question. So I'm glad you brought up reciprocity because that is all healthy, respectful relationships are grounded in reciprocity. Um, um, you give to me, I give to you. You support me, I support you. Um, there are people who treat the gods like vending machines. Um, they ignore them, and then they need something, and they go pour some offerings, and hey, I got a problem. Can you bail me out? And it doesn't always work that way. Um, and so we do have that when we're doing it right, we're forming these reciprocal relationships. We're engaging, we're making offerings on a regular basis. We're praying on a regular basis and meditating. And as I tell people, prayer is talking to the gods, meditation is listening for their response. We build those relationships and we reinforce them on a weekly and daily and monthly basis. And then when there is trouble, um, we've got that relationship to draw on. Um, it's the same thing in our human relationships as we build our religious communities, our pagan communities, witchcraft communities. Um, there has to be reciprocity. Um, it can't be I want to come in and I want you to feed me. It's I come in certainly you don't expect somebody who walks into their first circle to immediately start making contributions. Uh, we strongly discourage that. But once you feel like, okay, this is a place I'd like to be, then it's time to start take a part in the ritual, stick around and help us clean up. Um, if you have skills to teach, maybe it's time. Maybe you want to teach a class. If you don't have skills to teach, maybe you want to show up and support other people when they're teaching. So, um, if you put time and effort into community, into building those relationships, then those relationships will be there for you when you need them. So yeah, definitely um, it's a two-way street, and that's not something that mainstream American religion teaches.
No, no, that is very true. And it is much more interactive in that way. Not that every
Yes.
person has to make this like a central piece of how they spend all their energy and time. There's some of us that are a little crazier than others and spend more
Yes.
time on it. But there's still like degrees. There's always percentages of what you're gonna put in order. And that isn't something that as a culture we really talk about or think about, much to our detriment in more than just religious conversations. One could extend that out to other things. But anyway, my question to you is sort of like you have seen a lot of these organizations have troubles and do really well and do some things great and some things not so great. For people who are stepping into leadership positions or feel like that's something that they are called to do, what is some advice that you might have of like how we could do better? You know what I mean? Like how we could not repeat some of these mistakes that we've had. And then of course I'm going to turn the question around and say like, from the perspective of people who are new to it, what could we do to kind of try to add a little bit more to the conversation?
You can't do it alone. No group is going to succeed with one leader, no matter how strong that leader is. You got to have at least two, preferably three or four. But if you don't have, if you're the only leader, it's not going to work because number one, you're going to get overloaded and burned out, but also you're going to make mistakes that you wouldn't make if you had somebody else say, "Nah, I don't think we should do that." Um, that's Cynthia and I have been co-leaders at Denton Cups for a very long time. And over the years, we've had other people who've also come into leadership roles, but mainly it's me and her. And we're both very good leaders. We're both very good priests. We're both very good ritualists. Together, we're amazingly good because we support each other, we build on each other, we keep each other in check.
Very important. No, I
For pe for
agree.
people who are for people who are starting out, whether it's in personal practice or in group practice, don't overpromise and undercommit. Do the opposite. Um, Start small. Do one thing and do it well. And then when you're ready, add a second thing. Um, Definitely under promise, whether it's to yourself or your community or your gods. Sandbag a little. It's okay to sandbag a little. Um, do something, do it because when you do something and you do it well, that feels good. And that creates a sense of accomplishment and it builds confidence. And then you can add something else and you feel good about doing that. And when you do that, that builds your confidence even more. Um, the some years ago, more than a few years ago, there was a local group that I tried to help get off the ground. They were too geographically they were too far away for me to be a regular part of it, but I was trying to help them, and the person who was leading them just said, okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do that, we're that, and I just and I know, okay, this isn't going to work. They're overcommitting, they're overloading themselves, they're setting themselves up for failure, and I don't think the group lasted more than a year. Um, do one thing, do it well, then add something else.
Yeah, yeah. As the Aries in the room, I don't particularly love that advice because I'm usually the one that's what, but no, no, you mean do nine things, right? And then we do 10. I'm sure that's what you meant, but no, I completely agree. Um, at any stage of the process. Um, I think that there's the difficulty of, I think, also maneuvering, understanding that we need to build structures within these frameworks of neo-paganism, however you want to define that, whether it's Reconstructionist groups or Wicca or occult magic, where we have training programs and we have ways of sort of giving people skill sets so that they can succeed without gatekeeping and without just making people unnecessarily feel left out or excluded from things. Um, but then there's also the counter trend of people, unfortunately, because of the accessibility of social media, which is wonderful. I have a podcast for that very reason, because I can very easily reach a lot of people, and that's beautiful. It's also meant that it's become, I think, diluted or difficult for people to understand and reach the kinds of training that they might want or might be looking for. Like some people really do want training programs that are more in depth, or they're seeking more of a mentorship opportunity. And with the proliferation of so many voices in the room, it can be hard to kind of filter out the noise and the signal. For people who are feeling a little bit overwhelmed, what are some things I like to kind of give people advice on what to look for, or also what to avoid? If you're looking at someone as a potential teacher or mentor or trainer, whether it's divination or something else, what do you kind of think of as red flags of like, maybe watch out for this one versus, oh, these are green flags. This is a good sign.
Well, Thorne Coyle, who's author and teacher on the West Coast, Thorne says, never trust a teacher who only has students. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
who are your elders? Um, who can where are you learning? When you get to be a certain age and a certain level, there's not a lot of people in that imaginary hierarchy. But I will tell you, if I've got something that is if I've got something that is beyond my local friends, I get a hold of Ivo Dominguez Jr. Of the Assembly of the Sacred Wheel. Evo is like 2 years older than me, but Evo is definitely my elder. Um, not in any formal sense, but in the just in the sense that he's somebody whose experience and expertise and knowledge I just have tremendous respect for. So yeah. But back to Thorne's point, that's one of the things you look for. Who is this person's elder, teacher? Um, who is who? Mine went blank here. Um, who is their teacher? Who is their elder? Um, who are they listening to? I guess that's a better way
Yeah.
to put. Who are they listening to? Because when I have seen, and I've seen it several times with some people I truly respect, who really went off the deep end because there was nobody in their life who could tell them no. Nobody who could tell
Ugh.
me, I think this is a bad idea. Um, my wife is a Christian, but of the follow Jesus crowd, not the other crowd. Um, and she does a good job of making sure I don't get too far off the deep end. Magically, if I go off too far off the deep end, Cynthia's there to pull me back in. It's between the two of them, they don't let me get too far again off the deep end. But that's what back to your question. Um, look for who does that person listen to. Look at how they deal with other people. Um, if they're the queen or the king and everybody else is serving them, that's probably not a healthy thing.
Mhm.
Um, I've seen people who were very knowledgeable in what they do, but they had this cult of personality built up around them, and that's just not healthy. Um, what do they ask you to do? Um, if they ask you to if they ask you to put in the work and contribute to the group, and that's a good thing. If they demean you, if they gatekeep you, if they um, take advantage of you, that's not a good thing. Pay attention to your intuition.
Yeah.
Most of us over a certain age, a lot not don't have to get to be my age, but if you're an adult, you've probably been around enough bad people to recognize those signs. And um, if it doesn't seem right, it's probably not right. So keep looking.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm a big believer in buddy system, but not system that is just you constantly always having someone who's going to tell you yes. Like it's important that the buddy system involves some the strength of character to know that the people that are around you that are going to be giving you information are strong enough to also tell you when they think, hey, how about no? How about we look at that from another perspective? Because I love you, but maybe that's not the way. And knowing that someone that you are listening to also has a multiplicity of voices and someone that they're learning from and that kind of thing, to know that they're going to also listen to others is important too. I think that that also plays into, though, the importance of learning slowly over time to um, you mentioned the 90s and the whole solitary practitioner thing. I was that. I mean, being a teenage practitioner, I didn't have access to any in-person teachers or anything like that. So books and the solitary way was absolutely my first introduction, which I'm very grateful to those authors for providing. However, it has the weakness, and I think that's possibly something that's societal or generational. I don't know because I can't get outside of it, of saying that, kind of back to that initial point of we need to also be able to work together with others that we don't necessarily always completely agree with. And when we have that multiplicity of voices that aren't always saying the same exact thing that the one author we read or whatever, or our opinion in our heads agrees with, then we're going to have a broader perspective that will probably keep us more in line is not the phrase I want, but in a more balanced perspective that's probably healthier.
Yes.
And that unfortunately might have come out of that solid sort of like solitary way of learning that blossomed. But then if it's not countered by, oh, and now you need to learn to get along with and work with others and be balanced by others, then the community can't grow really, because then you're always going to be stuck in these little silos. Um, which is interesting to me because now we have social media, which does connect people. On one level, it is bringing a lot more people together, but it hasn't necessarily bridged that gap into larger communities. I mean, you have this blog that has a huge, that has a very large following, and it's led to books and all sorts of other things in addition to your other work. Do you think that there's ways that we could do social media or these kinds of things better to try to form community more, or what is your thought on that?
Um, I don't have any brilliant ideas when it comes to that. Um, again, and I'm a little, I won't say burned out. I'm discouraged with the our inability to build solid growing institutions, because I think we need that going forward. And we haven't been able to do that with rare exceptions. Um, what's going to happen to Circle Sanctuary when Selena's gone? Um, is there somebody to take that over? I don't know. I'm sure she's been thinking about it. I'm sure she's got a succession plan, but um, is it going to hold up? And that's the best we've got right now. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm frustrated, disappointed that we can't do that. Um, Again, my focus has been really much over the last 6 or 7 years has really been more narrowly focused on I'm going to teach the people who come to me. I'm going to um, I'm going to worship and celebrate with my local group, and I'm done trying to build big things. That will be, that's for the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely understand what you mean. When it comes to that, I like to I like to ask people, you've given a lot of advice both on your blog and a little bit here on this episode of kind of how you think of advice for people who are coming to this, but from the perspective of divination specifically, and whether we're talking about omens or flipping tarot cards. Um, what would be your advice from that smaller perspective of how to let divination kind of help guide your path without letting it either overwhelm your reason and making you do illogical things that you probably shouldn't? Like, what are some general things that you encourage people that are around you in person to sort of incorporate that?
I mean, I'm using divination probably now more than ever, just in my own life. Um, I'm nearing the end of my professional career, and I've got the opportunity to be a full-time druid. I've got the opportunity to, I'm here in a couple of years, I'm going to have the opportunity to build a whole new life. And I want to do it right. And I've got plans, and I'm using divination to help me. The example I like to give is turn on your headlights so you can see a little further down the road. What's coming that I need to be aware of? Um, what's Sometimes divination can be used as a map. I don't know how to get from point A to point B, but do a card spread for that. And oh, okay, I can go here to here to here. Um, Divination is helping me with seeing things that I might otherwise miss, with clarifying questions in my on for my own goals. Um, Ultimately, we're responsible for our own lives. And as I tell people, never surrender your agency to a deck of cards or the spirits that may or may not be behind them. Um, on the other hand, if the cards can show me things I'm not seeing, that gives me more information to make a better decision with. So yeah, that's the thing. I'm just divination gives us more information to work with so we can make better decisions.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. One thing I meant to ask you earlier, because I love to ask this, is I think it works as like a sort of next to last question or something of that nature, is um, I know for myself as a violinist as well as a witch and a diviner, many times the things that I have learned the most from have been the times when something hasn't gone well. When a thing has gone badly or not gone the way I planned, I've actually learned the most from it. So it's kind of open-ended as a question. But is there an example of something either from the perspective of a druid and a polytheist, or in working with divination, that is an example of a story where you're like, yeah, so I learned from this when it went badly, and I would love to share that story so that you won't make the same mistake I did, whether that's when you were first starting out or, yesterday.
So this is something that when I was just starting out, and it's I I I worked a spell for some very trivial reasons, and it worked, and I got exactly what I wanted. About a week later, I was in a similar situation, and it all went to hell. Um, Now, I don't, the old thing about here's a spell to find a parking spot. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something where I was influencing some other people's lives in a trivial way, but in a way that was still real, and it really taught me to respect magic, um, to respect what it can do, and that it can backfire on you. I think all of us who play in this sandbox, um, we end up burning our fingers sooner or later, and we learn something from that. Um, we we work magic for a trivial purpose. Um, we work magic, and we work magic for a general target, and forget that that's not what we needed. The example I like to give is, um, if you work magic for money, you may find a $20 bill laying on the sidewalk. And that's nice, but not if what you really needed was $500 so you can make rent. I think that's another thing where I've messed up a time or two, is when my magical targets or my divination questions have been too vague, and the answers I got, the results I got were real and true, but they weren't what I needed. Um, you got to be precise.
Yeah, you have to be precise and also aware of what it is you're either asking about or asking for. Yeah.
Yes, and I will, and as I tell people in divination, forming the right question is half of the job. If you can ask the right question, you're halfway there.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. That is so much of the battle. So, the question that I love to sort of end with for the moment is if you have any. Sometimes it's always interesting to me to, especially since you teach and you are involved with kind of helping people on a number of different levels. If you could give people like a piece of advice of something that you think they should do more or do less of. I don't know. I don't really care, but um, like a piece of general advice for people who are practitioners that you think that they should try to keep in mind in their practice or do more of or do less of. What would you want to sort of leave people with in that sense?
Give things time to work.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
Persistence is a virtue. Um, give things time to work. Give your magic time to work. Give your practice time to work. Um, if you start out a regular practice of, okay, I'm going to do meditation, prayers, and offerings 3 times a week, and I do that for a month and a half, and I'm really not feeling anything, okay, I'm going to do something else. Well, you really haven't given it a chance to work. Whatever it is you do, stay with it. Give it time to work. Um, Meditation is something that you you never really learn all you need to learn about it. Um, it's something you're going to start today, and you're going to be doing it for the rest of your life. Stay with things, whether it's whether it's a magical practice, divination practice, devotional practice, a group that you're working with. Give things time to work. Be persistent.
Yeah, that is wonderful. So thank you for that. Uh, don't be hasty. Yeah. Says the Aries. Oh, I know. So for people who obviously they're in the show notes, I'm going to have links to your blog and your website and all that good stuff. But where can people find you, or what are other things that you'd want to share about what is coming up? This interview is obviously coming out, early in the year, but what projects do you have that you want to tell people about?
At the moment, I don't have any projects underway at the moment.
Mhm.
I just completed an online class uh, uh, titled the Call of Cernunnos, um, based on the Book of Cernunnos that Jason Mankey and I edited. Um, all of my classes are online. They are all on demand. They're on the undertheancientoaks.com website.
Mhm.
You can take them at any time. Um, Obviously, you can't participate in the live events after it's happened, but we get recordings there, and then of course I'm always available to answer questions. If people are looking for me, the two places you look for me are on the blog, on the Patheos blog, and then on the undertheancientoaks.com website. Social media, I'm on Facebook, um, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram. Have a YouTube channel, but I don't do a lot with it. I'm not on Twitter. I read on Twitter, but I don't post on Twitter anymore. It's just I never got a lot of traffic there anyway.
Yeah.
Mainly, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. If you send me a Facebook friend request, also send me a private message. Tell me who you are, where you know me from, something to let me know that you're not a spammer or a bot.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
yeah, I'm easy to find.
Yes, and I am very grateful to you for your time in this conversation, and I really hope that there will be many more so that we can dive into other topics. But I really appreciate everything that you've done with your blog and what you've shared in your books. So I am thankful to you for your time today. So thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. Like I said, I enjoy talking about this stuff.
Black moon above, stars overhead. Don't you dare guide me back to my bed. The river is frozen, the pollen path's bare. Don't wait for me, darling, there's thorns in my